Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a practice that might just make you reconsider your choice of bedtime accommodations. Imagine finding a hollowed tree as your home, a natural sanctuary to live in. And believe it or not, this was the real-life situation for Ethiopian monks centuries ago. These monks, living in seclusion among the rugged mountains of Ethiopia, believed that the hollowed trees were the perfect refuge to deepen their connection to God. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this, but I'm guessing you'll find it incredibly fascinating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're watching from, so go ahead and post your location and local time below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The practice of living in hollowed trees was not a casual whim for these monks. It was a deeply spiritual and intentional choice. In Ethiopia, Christian monasticism has a long and proud history, with its roots extending back to the early 4th century, when Christianity first took hold in the region. Ethiopia, after all, is one of the oldest Christian kingdoms in the world, and its monks were dedicated to living lives of asceticism, prayer, and devotion to God. These monks didn't just want to follow the example of Jesus, they sought a higher level of spiritual connection by withdrawing from society completely. What made these monasteries so unique was that they didn't take the form of grand stone buildings or wooden huts, as one might expect. Instead, these monks turned to nature itself, finding solace in the hollowed trunks of ancient trees. The trees were sacred, their deep, cavernous hollows providing the monks with both a physical and spiritual sanctuary. It wasn't just about finding shelter. The monks believed that the tree itself, as a living organism, could offer spiritual protection. These trees were seen as a symbol of the divine, with the belief that God's presence could be felt in the trunks and branches that surrounded them. And so the monks took refuge in these wooden sanctuaries, living in quiet harmony with the natural world. But why trees specifically? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore. Ethiopian monasticism has long been an integral part of the country's spiritual fabric. It's a fascinating story that begins in the 4th century, when Christianity first found its way into Ethiopia, one of the first nations to adopt Christianity as its state religion. The Christian faith quickly spread deeply, influencing the culture and spiritual practices. But it wasn't until later that monasticism began to take root, primarily in the northern highlands of Ethiopia, where the first hermits sought solace in nature's embrace. In these remote regions, far from the bustling cities and villages, monks decided to go beyond the traditional monastery structure. The idea was simple, yet profound: to live as Christ had, in the wilderness, in total separation from the distractions of worldly life. These monks embraced asceticism as a means to cultivate purity and strengthen their devotion. But, as with many aspects of religious life, the path to spiritual enlightenment wasn't just about retreating into nature. It was about aligning oneself with the divine. At the core of this monastic practice was a deeply held belief that living in close proximity to nature would enhance the monk's spiritual experience. These monks didn't just build simple huts or seek shelter in caves like other monastic traditions. They turned to the trees themselves, using hollowed-out trunks as both homes and places of spiritual refuge. This wasn't an accident or a mere survival tactic. The choice of trees was highly symbolic. Historians still argue about whether these monks initially chose trees for their practical properties, shelter protection from the elements, or if the trees were chosen for their deep spiritual significance. One thing is clear: the act of living inside a tree was seen as a form of communion with God. The natural world was considered a direct expression of God's will, and living within the living, breathing wood of these trees was seen as a way to immerse oneself fully in God's creation. As the monks lived their quiet, secluded lives within the trees, their devotion grew stronger. They believed that the very act of being enclosed in a natural, living entity, complete with roots, bark, and branches, offered a unique form of closeness to the divine. The trees, like the monks, were steadfast and enduring, weathering time and change. And so these hollowed trees became more than just a shelter. They became sacred spaces, places where the monks could truly feel the presence of God. But let's pause for a moment. Imagine being a monk living in one of those trees. It's peaceful, sure, but there's also a touch of isolation that most of us would find unnerving. You'd spend your days praying, fasting, and meditating in total silence with no distractions. The only sounds you'd hear would be the wind rustling through the leaves, the occasional rustle of wildlife, and your own voice as you recite your prayers. It sounds almost peaceful, right? But this isolation came with its own set of challenges, both spiritual and physical. You trudge through a grove of ancient oaks, the dappled sunlight flickering across your shoulders, and suddenly it hits you. These trees aren't just scenery, they're part of the plan. For Ethiopian monks, nature wasn't merely a backdrop for prayer. It was the very stage on which their spiritual drama unfolded. From the moment Christian monasticism first blossomed, starting with the Desert Fathers in 3rd century Egypt, nature has been central to monastic life, so much so that early monks deliberately sought the desert's stark landscapes to wrestle with demons, both inner and outer. In Ethiopia, that legacy took a unique twist. Instead of caves, they chose living trees as sanctuaries. You probably wouldn't survive a week in those branches without a coffee IV drip. But for monks yearning to strip away every distraction, the forest was nirvana. Mainstream history tells us that by the 4th century, following the example of Saint Anthony the Great, monastics across the Christian world fled cities to embrace solitude. Historians still argue whether the physical hardships of desert life or the threat of wild animals refined their faith more. But either way, nature was key. In Ethiopia's highlands, the desert gives way to forested slopes, and monks naturally adapted the tradition. They saw the living tree as a holy vessel, an organic chapel, where every ring told a story of growth, decay, and rebirth. You can almost hear them whispering prayers into the bark, hoping God would echo their devotion back. Fringe tales even claim some monks believe the trees hosted guardian spirits. Think of it like roommates who never bother you, but always judge your singing during Vespers. There's a quirky rumor that one monk tried to communicate with a particularly ancient fig tree by tapping Morse code into its trunk. Historians still argue whether this ever actually happened or if it's just part of the oral lore. Either way, it illustrates how monks saw trees as sentient allies in their quest for divine intimacy. They believed the rustling leaves were angels tinkling tiny cymbals above their heads, providing ambient music for their prayers. Talk about sleep-friendly ASMR. Your guide through this verdant labyrinth would probably point out that Ethiopian monk hermits didn't limit themselves to trees. Some lived in caves carved into cliffs, while a few even perched on narrow ledges. One monk reportedly fell asleep standing up after so many hours of silent vigil. Historians still argue whether that feat was a miracle of faith or a sheer lack of thigh strength. Either way, these stories show nature wasn't just scenery. It was an active participant. By choosing hollowed trees, Ethiopian monks elevated nature from passive backdrop to co-conspirator in their spiritual life. The tree's roots anchored them to the earth, while its branches reached toward heaven, a perfect metaphor that would make any Sunday school teacher proud. But it was more than symbolism. Living literally inside a tree meant constant contact with the elements, the smell of wet bark after rain, the itch of crawling insects, the sway of branches in a gusty wind. You might think that sounds like a nightmare for your sinuses, but for the monks, it was an immersive experience, a perpetual reminder of their own vulnerability and the grandeur of creation. Imagine performing your daily prayers as raindrops drum on your wooden walls, each drop a percussion instrument in a cosmic orchestra. On calm days, the sunlight would stream through cracks in the trunk, creating dramatic shafts of light, nature's own spotlight in a drama of devotion. Rumor has it, one particularly theatrical monk timed his prayers to the sunbeams, starting each psalm as a ray hit his makeshift altar exactly. Historians still argue whether this was genuine piety or just a monk with an impeccable sense of timing. You might be thinking, okay, that's all very poetic. But what about practical comforts? Well, comfort was the least of their concerns. The monks often lined the interior with woven mats made from local grasses, delicate padding that felt like sleeping on a hay bale. They'd carve tiny niches into the wood as makeshift shelves for scrolls and prayer books, though the damp climate meant manuscripts risked turning into pulp. Let's just say those texts had a higher turnover rate than a fast food joint. Despite the hardships, being ensconced in a living tree offered a constant lesson in impermanence. One monk described how he watched a leaf sprout by his shoulder in spring, then brown, and drip off in autumn, a cyclical miracle that reminded him of birth, death, and the promise of resurrection. You probably won't get that kind of mindfulness from your office cubicle unless your cubicle has seasonal foliage. Monks also harness nature's cycles for their prayer rhythms. They mark time by the position of the sun and moon rather than mechanical clocks. Historians still argue whether this solar-aligned schedule was more accurate than the water clocks used in medieval monasteries elsewhere. The changing light patterns became part of their liturgy, each shift a cue for a new prayer or meditation session. So, if you thought your smartwatch woke you up a lot, try a tree, telling you, "Hey buddy, dawn's over, time to chant." And let's not forget the wildlife. Bark-dwelling ants were unwelcome roommates, but the occasional bird nest in the branches above offered a cheerful serenade at dawn. Fringe accounts tell of monks intentionally coaxing weavers to build nests on their homes, believing bird songs carried divine messages, though skeptics suggest they just liked the morning alarm. Historians still argue whether that was pure spiritual practice or early noise therapy experimentation. Through it all, the sacred role of nature in Ethiopian monastic life stands as a testament to the monks' radical devotion. They didn't just conquer nature, they embraced it, making the forest itself a partner in their spiritual journey. Next time you're stuck in traffic cursing the honking horns, remember these monks who welcomed the tapping of rain and tickle of leaves as reminders of God's presence. As the monks made their homes in hollowed trees, one of the greatest challenges they faced was not just physical, though dealing with the elements, wildlife, and the occasional sore back from sleeping on uneven bark was no easy feat. The real difficulty lay in maintaining a pure state of mind, free from distractions. The monks in the trees were living examples of what it meant to be removed from worldly concerns, yet they still had to navigate the complex mental and spiritual landscape of isolation. Their days were structured around the rhythm of prayer, fasting, and meditation, with very few interruptions. But you may be wondering, how exactly did they manage to stay focused in such an environment? Picture yourself tucked away inside a hollow tree, the smell of damp wood around you, your body in constant contact with the tree's texture, your ears attuned to the rustling leaves or the occasional chirp of a bird. There's no TV, no internet, heck, not even a radio. The solitude was absolute, yet this was part of the beauty of it. Every moment became a meditation, every action was steeped in purpose. Monastic life was carefully regimented. The day began before dawn with the monks rising to greet the sun as it began to pierce through the canopy of trees. They would chant prayers as the first light filtered in through the cracks of their wooden homes, feeling the natural energy of the earth coursing through their being. The rhythm of the seasons and the light of the day dictated their movements. Historians still debate whether the strict daily routine was born out of necessity or religious devotion. Some scholars suggest that the harshness of tree-dwelling life forced monks to adopt such structure, while others believe it was a conscious effort to mirror the disciplined life of early Christian ascetics who sought to purge themselves of worldly distractions. Either way, this routine helped the monks keep their focus on their connection to the divine. The structure brought stability to their otherwise unpredictable lives. During the day, their tasks were simple but deeply meaningful. The monks foraged for food, relying on the earth to provide everything they needed. Fruits, herbs, and vegetables were grown in nearby gardens or gathered from the wild, and their diet was simple but nourishing. Foraging wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. The monks believed that the act of gathering food directly from nature strengthened their bond with God. Eating wasn't an indulgence. It was a form of gratitude, a recognition of the earth's sacred bounty. While foraging, monks often took the time to meditate on the interconnectedness of all life. The trees, animals, and plants were seen as divine manifestations, each one holding a lesson for those willing to listen. The simple act of plucking a fruit from a branch was a moment of deep reflection, a reminder of the interconnectedness of life. But what about the night? Well, as the sun began to set, the monks would retreat to their hollowed trunks to rest. But rest wasn't about sleep in the conventional sense. Monks didn't sleep the way we do today, buried under blankets and tucked away in soft beds. Instead, their sleep was often broken into two parts, with long periods of vigil prayer and contemplation during the night. You might think that sleeping in a hollow tree might lead to some restless nights. The cool mountain air, the occasional scurrying of animals outside, and the constant sounds of the wind could make it difficult to fall asleep. Yet, for the monks, this discomfort was part of the process. Historians still argue whether this interrupted sleep cycle helped them achieve a greater spiritual clarity, or whether it was simply a practical response to the unyielding demands of their environment. Either way, the monks learned to embrace the discomfort, using it as a tool for spiritual refinement. In the stillness of the night, the monks would reflect on their day's activities, offering thanks for the sustenance they had gathered and the quiet moments spent in prayer. The peaceful silence of the trees provided the perfect environment for meditation, and it was in these moments that the monks could truly hear the whisper of the divine carried on the wind through the leaves. While the physical hardships of living in hollowed trees were certainly great, the monks saw their lifestyle as an opportunity for spiritual growth. The simplicity and solitude allowed them to focus entirely on their faith, removing the distractions that clouded the minds of those who lived in the bustling cities below. Their days were marked not by the noise of the world, but by the gentle whispers of the natural world around them. The world outside may have been full of chaos and noise, but inside the tree, the monks found a calmness that was unparalleled. Their sleep was an extension of this spiritual practice. Just as their waking hours were filled with devotion, their sleep was also a sacred time, a time for communion with the divine. The monks believed that even in sleep, they could continue to grow closer to God. The trees became more than just their home. They became a holy space where the monks could retreat into the arms of nature and find solace in the presence of God. So, while the physical comforts were minimal, the spiritual rewards were profound. These monks living in the hollows of trees found a kind of peace that most people could only dream of. In their secluded world, the monk's life became a perfect balance of solitude, simplicity, and deep spiritual reflection. And for those who were able to experience it, it was a reminder that sometimes the most profound spiritual experiences are found not in grand cathedrals or impressive structures, but in the quiet, humble spaces of nature. Imagine yourself nestled inside one of these hollow trees, the bark cool against your back, the wind gently brushing against your skin as the sun dips below the horizon. While the monks were deeply immersed in their spiritual practice, they were also highly attuned to the environment around them. The natural world wasn't just a passive background in their lives, it was an active participant in their monastic journey. In fact, the very trees they lived in were regarded as sacred, with some believing that the spirits of the forest itself were there to guide them. Let's take a deeper look at how these monks interacted with the forest and its inhabitants. The belief in the sacredness of nature was central to their existence. The trees, believed to be inhabited by divine spirits, provided the monks with more than just physical shelter. They saw the trees as spiritual companions, with each branch, leaf, and root symbolizing God's creation. To these monks, there was no division between the sacred and the mundane. Everything from the smallest ant crawling at the base of the tree to the tallest branch swaying in the breeze was infused with the divine. Historians still argue whether these monastic beliefs were shaped by indigenous Ethiopian traditions or if they were directly influenced by early Christian monastic practices in the Mediterranean. What's certain, however, is that the monks of Ethiopia believed in the interconnectivity of all life forms. As they prayed and meditated within their tree homes, they didn't just seek a connection to God. They also sought to understand the deeper truths of nature and the world around them. It was through their connection with nature that the monks found not just physical sustenance but also spiritual nourishment. The act of foraging for food, of gathering fruits and herbs from the wild, was not just a practical necessity, it was a form of worship. To the monks, the act of plucking a ripe fruit or pulling a root from the earth wasn't about satisfying hunger. It was about recognizing the divine in every part of nature. Each meal became a ritual, an opportunity to thank God for the bounty provided by the earth. The monks' relationship with animals was also unique. While many of us would find it unsettling to live among the creatures of the wild, the Ethiopian monks saw these animals as fellow inhabitants of God's creation. They believed that the animals, from the smallest insects to the larger creatures that roamed the forests, were sent by God to teach them lessons. It wasn't uncommon for a monk to spend hours in silent communion with the birds or insects around them, observing their behavior and learning from their simple, unassuming lives. Historians still argue whether this reverence for animals was a reflection of the monks' religious beliefs or if it was simply a practical adaptation to their environment. Either way, the monks saw themselves as part of a larger, interconnected web of life. Now, imagine living your life so closely connected to the natural world. The forest would become a constant companion, offering you food, shelter, and wisdom. The trees would become your home, your altar, and your sanctuary. You wouldn't just live in the forest, you would be part of it. Every rustle of the leaves, every chirp of a bird, every gust of wind would carry with it a reminder of the divine presence surrounding you. This connection with nature wasn't just about survival, it was about transcending the physical world and achieving a deeper spiritual connection. The monks believed that by embracing the natural world so fully, they were able to enter a state of constant prayer. They weren't just waiting for the divine to visit them in church or on special occasions. They believed that the divine was present in every moment, in every leaf, in every gust of wind. As you sit back and relax, think about the monks' dedication to this simple, profound lifestyle. They didn't need grand cathedrals or beautiful altars to connect with God. All they needed was a hollowed tree, the air around them, and the belief that the entire world was a reflection of God's creation. Their lives remind us that sometimes the greatest spiritual truths can be found not in elaborate rituals or places of worship, but in the quiet simplicity of nature itself. Their faith, as embodied in their daily practices, was grounded in this belief. Through living in harmony with the forest, they found the solitude and the silence necessary to listen more closely to God. The hollowed trees standing tall in the Ethiopian highlands became not only their refuge, but also their sanctuary, an eternal connection to the earth, and more importantly, to God. The monks' devotion to nature and their deep reverence for the trees would leave a lasting imprint on the history of Ethiopian monasticism. Although the practice of living in hollowed trees eventually declined with the rise of stone monasteries, the monks' teachings about simplicity, silence, and the sacredness of nature continue to resonate today. Historians still argue whether this ancient practice was purely spiritual or whether it served a more practical role in helping the monks survive in harsh, remote conditions. Regardless, the story of these monks living within trees is a reminder that sometimes the most profound moments of spiritual connection come from the quietest, simplest of places. As the centuries passed, the practice of living in hollowed trees began to fade. The natural beauty of the Ethiopian highlands, once the perfect home for monks seeking spiritual solitude, slowly gave way to the growing influence of stone monasteries. These new structures, with their stone walls and towering spires, offered more comfort and permanence, something that the humble tree could never provide. While the hollowed tree monasteries were a place of pure devotion and divine connection, the growing convenience of stone architecture combined with external pressures from society meant that the ancient practice eventually saw a decline. Historians still debate the reasons for this shift, Some argue that the rise of stone-built monasteries reflected the changing needs of Ethiopian monasticism as the monks found it necessary to gather and teach more followers in more stable communal settings. The forest was no longer an adequate refuge as the Christian community expanded and needed more formal places of worship. On the other hand, some suggest that the changing climate and environmental challenges, such as deforestation and increasing threats from wild animals, made the hollowed trees less viable for sustained habitation. With the advancement of agricultural practices and the settlement of more communities in the area, the trees that once served as sacred refuges began to dwindle. Despite these changes, traces of the ancient tradition remain in the modern-day practices of some Ethiopian monks. While most have moved into more permanent monasteries, there are still monks who live in seclusion, choosing remote locations to continue their spiritual journey. These monks, though no longer residing in trees, carry the spirit of that ancient monasticism, seeking to isolate themselves from the distractions of the world in order to deepen their connection with God. In addition to these isolated monks, modern pilgrims who seek to follow in the footsteps of the ancient Ethiopian monks occasionally venture into the highlands, visiting the sacred forests where their forebears once dwelled. Though hollowed trees are now rare, the symbolism of these sacred spaces endures. Some monasteries even maintain gardens that resemble the forest sanctuaries of the past, preserving the connection to nature that was once at the heart of monastic life. The legacy of the monks who lived in hollowed trees is not just a historical curiosity, it is a living, breathing part of Ethiopia's spiritual heritage. The stories passed down from generation to generation continue to inspire those who seek deeper meaning in their own lives. The monks' willingness to embrace solitude and live in harmony with nature serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of simplicity, silence, and connection with the earth in our increasingly complex and fast-paced world. But as we reflect on their lives, we must ask ourselves, what does it mean to live a truly devoted life in today's world? While most of us aren't ready to take up residence in a hollow tree, the monk's example teaches us the value of slowing down and seeking a deeper connection with the natural world around us. Whether through meditation, prayer, or simply spending time in nature, we can all learn from their ability to listen deeply to the world, to hear the whispers of the divine carried on the wind through the trees. It's easy to overlook the simple things in life, especially when we're bombarded by the distractions of modern living. But the Ethiopian monks remind us that sometimes the most profound spiritual experiences come not from grand gestures or elaborate rituals, but from a deep connection with nature and the stillness that it offers. Their practice, born out of a desire to strip away the distractions of the world, is as relevant today as it was centuries ago. The hollows of the trees may no longer house monks, but their spiritual legacy lives on. The message is clear. There is wisdom to be found in nature, in solitude, and in the quiet spaces where we can hear the voice of God. Whether in the wind-swept highlands of Ethiopia or in the quiet corners of our own lives, the call to silence, solitude, and connection to nature remains as strong as ever. And so, as we drift off into sleep tonight, let us take with us the lessons of the Ethiopian monks. Let us remember that peace and clarity can be found in the simplest of places, in the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, and the quiet moments of solitude that allow us to hear the divine presence in our lives. The monks may have lived in trees, but we can carry their spirit with us wherever we go. As we continue to reflect on the Ethiopian monks who once called hollow trees their home, we start to recognize how their way of life was in many ways a radical departure from modern-day expectations of comfort, community, and even spiritual fulfillment. The monks weren't just seeking refuge from the world. They were seeking to transcend the distractions that we too are often overwhelmed by. In a world filled with constant noise and a never-ending flow of information, their lives serve as a quiet protest against the chaos, showing us the deep value of withdrawing from the world to listen more closely to what truly matters. We live in a time where instant gratification is only a click away. From the buzzing of smartphones to the hum of city life, distractions are everywhere. But the monks, tucked away in the hollows of trees, found freedom in a life of simplicity. There, with no electricity, no social media, and no endless demands on their time, they were able to connect with something greater than themselves, whether that was through prayer, meditation, or their relationship with the land. The trees they lived in, once living and breathing as part of God's creation, became the perfect environment for cultivating stillness and presence. Historians still debate whether this type of seclusion made the monks better prepared to face the challenges of the spiritual life, or if it was more about their sheer devotion. Some argue that isolation can often lead to self-deception, that too much silence can give rise to misinterpretation and fanaticism. Others claim that the monks' commitment to this lifestyle demonstrated extraordinary spiritual discipline, allowing them to strip away the distractions of their world. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. What we do know is that the monks' ability to immerse themselves fully in nature allowed them to reach a depth of connection with God that many of us can only imagine. The way they approached their spiritual life was all-encompassing. It wasn't just about ritualistic prayer or fasting. It was about integrating every aspect of life: the food they ate, the air they breathed, the trees they lived within, into their understanding of the divine. By giving up so much of what the modern world values, comfort, wealth, luxury, even human companionship, they demonstrated an extraordinary sense of commitment to their faith. In doing so, they became the embodiment of a simple yet powerful truth, that the truest form of connection with God and the universe can often be found in the quietest moments, in the simplest places. The hollowed trees were not just homes to these monks. They were sacred vessels in which they could experience the full range of life's spiritual potential. Today we don't have the luxury, or perhaps the desire to seek out hollow trees as our sanctuaries. But as we reflect on the lives of the Ethiopian monks, we might find inspiration in their commitment to solitude and simplicity. How often do we take time to truly listen, to sit quietly and connect with ourselves, with nature, or with our spirituality? It can be difficult in our modern world, but there's something deeply healing about returning to a simpler pace where we can tune out the noise and tune into the subtle presence of the divine. Perhaps it's time to think about carving out our own sacred space, a place where we can reflect, recharge, and reconnect. Whether it's a quiet spot in nature, a moment of solitude in our homes, or simply a few minutes away from the distractions of technology, we can all create a little piece of peace in our own lives. The monks may have found their peace in hollow trees, but we too can find it in whatever small space we can carve out for ourselves. As the night draws on and we begin to slow down for sleep, let's consider how we can live our lives with the same intentionality and purpose that these monks did. Their simple, sacred existence in the trees reminds us that sometimes the greatest spiritual experiences come not from grand gestures, but from quiet moments of reflection, simplicity, and solitude. Let the peaceful stillness of tonight's story carry you into a deep and restful sleep as you reflect on the ways in which you too can find quiet sanctuary in your own life, and how you can connect more deeply with the world around you. The monks may have had their trees, but perhaps we can find our own form of quiet refuge in the stillness of the night. As we move toward the final reflections on the lives of the Ethiopian monks, we begin to see a broader, more timeless lesson in their devotion and simplicity. The hollowed trees, their sanctuary for so many years, were not just places for physical shelter. They were metaphors for the spiritual life itself. The monks who chose these spaces weren't just finding refuge from the world, they were engaging in a deep, intimate relationship with it. Each day spent within the tree was a practice of patience, surrender, and listening. These monks embodied a kind of stillness that most of us rarely experience in the hustle and bustle of modern life. For many of us, the search for inner peace often feels like a pursuit we can't quite grasp. We look for it in the things we do, the people we interact with, and the places we visit. We crave connection and a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. But the monks living in their hollowed tree homes teach us something invaluable. Peace doesn't need to be sought outside of ourselves. It can be found within the simplicity of the present moment, in the quiet space we create when we allow ourselves to listen deeply. Historians still argue whether the monks, by choosing this radical form of isolation, were attempting to escape the chaos of society, or whether they were simply trying to deepen their connection with God and nature. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps the world around them, with its noise, its demands, and its distractions, was simply too overwhelming to allow the monks to truly connect with the divine. In choosing the tree, the monks were saying no to the outside world, saying yes to a more profound spiritual existence. In this quiet space, free from the external chatter, they could hear the whispers of God more clearly. While we may not be inclined to sleep in hollow trees or remove ourselves from society entirely, the lesson here is one of intentionality. We can't always escape the noise, but we can choose how we respond to it. In our modern lives filled with endless digital distractions, constant notifications, and the pressure to be constantly on, it's easy to forget the simple practice of stillness. Yet the monks of Ethiopia remind us that we don't have to go far to find peace. We can cultivate it right where we are, whether through moments of silent prayer, a walk through nature, or simply taking time to unplug and be present. We have the ability to carve out our own spaces of refuge. By living in the trees, these monks didn't just seek to live in solitude. They sought to live in full communion with nature, understanding that it was through this deep connection that they could find peace and clarity. The very act of surrendering to the rhythms of the natural world, of allowing the trees and animals to guide their days, was an act of trust. They didn't need to control the world around them. They simply needed to listen to it. This level of surrender is something most of us struggle to achieve. The constant pressure to perform, to achieve, to stay busy can make it difficult to hear our own inner voice, let alone the subtle guidance of the universe. As we drift off to sleep tonight, let us carry the lessons of these monks with us. Let us remember that stillness is not a luxury, but a necessity for spiritual and mental well-being. Whether it's the calming rustle of leaves in a forest or the gentle hum of a fan in our own homes, there is peace to be found when we learn to slow down, be present, and listen. The monks of Ethiopia found their peace in the hollow of a tree, but we too can find it in the quiet spaces of our own lives. So, as the world continues to swirl around us, let's remember the monks who lived simply, quietly, and intentionally in communion with the trees. Their legacy isn't just one of asceticism. It's a legacy of listening, of embracing the natural world, and of finding peace in the spaces between the noise. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, take a moment to reflect on how you can invite more stillness into your life and connect more deeply with the world around you. Let your sleep be filled with the same peace that these monks found in their hollowed trees. You wake before dawn, the fragile light slipping in through the fissures of your wooden sanctuary, and immediately you press your lips to a rough-woven mat for prayer. Your breath hangs in the cool air as you whisper the first psalms, the ancient melodies echoing against the curved interior of the tree trunk. This is the beginning of your daily routine, an unbroken chain of devotion, contemplation, and communion with the natural world around you. After your initial prayers, you rise slowly, feeling the dampness of the bark beneath your feet. You wrap yourself in a simple tunic woven from goat's hair and step outside, greeted by the crisp mountain air. The sky is a canvas of pale pink and orange, and birds begin their morning chorus. You pause, letting their songs fill your senses, reminding yourself that every creature, even the tiniest ant, scuttling at your foot, has a part to play in God's grand design. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were standardized across different monastic communities, or if each hermit developed his own unique sequence of prayers. But here, tucked among the grand forests of the Ethiopian highlands, silence, interrupted only by bird calls, became your norm. Next comes your physical upkeep, simple, purposeful, and deeply intentional. You gather water from a nearby spring, feeling the chill of the mountain stream against your palms. The water is pure and cold, believed by some fringe accounts to have minor healing properties when drunk at dawn. Historians still argue whether this was a spiritual belief or just a happy coincidence of mineral-rich spring water. Scooping the water into a carved wooden cup, you rinse your face and hands, letting the droplets fall back onto the roots of the tree, an offering to the earth. Your first meal of the day occurs shortly after. You walk to a small garden plot you maintain at the base of your tree monastery. There, rows of barley chickpeas and small herbs flourish in carefully tended mounds of soil. These gardens were modest but produced enough to sustain you. The monks believed that cultivating their own food was a prayer in action. Each seed sown was an act of faith, each harvest a testament to God's provision. You harvest a handful of chickpeas, munching them slowly, savoring their earthy flavor. You might sprinkle a few fresh herb leaves on top, a touch of mint or basil, whose aroma seems almost intoxicating in the early morning air. You eat mindfully, chewing each bite, aware that this simple ritual connects you to everything around you. Once your meal is done, you return to the tree, where you unroll a small mat and settle in for your first session of extended meditation. You cross your legs, straighten your back against the tree's curved wall, and close your eyes. In this moment, the world outside seems to fall away, leaving only the rhythm of your breath and the soft murmur of the wind through the leaves. It is here, wrapped in the embrace of the tree, that you feel closest to the divine. Many monks spoke of reaching an almost trance-like state during these sessions where time felt suspended and every breath was both prayer and answer. Scholars still debate whether these deep meditative states were purely spiritual or influenced by mild hypoxia at high altitudes, but regardless, you emerge feeling renewed. Mid-morning is dedicated to scriptural study. You pull from a small leather satchel one of your scrolls, often a passage from the Psalms or the writings of early desert fathers. The humidity in the tree can threaten the fragile parchment, so you read quickly and carefully, knowing the text will not last forever. Yet each word is as sacred as the day it was first penned. You chant the verses aloud in a gentle rhythmic chant, allowing the vibrations to reverberate through the hollow trunk. The resonance feels like a celestial echo, as though the tree itself is amplifying your devotion. Fringe tales tell of monks whose chants caused the entire forest to vibrate with a low hum, though historians still argue whether this was actual sound or a shared optical illusion born of deep trance. As midday approaches, you take a break from meditation and study to tend to minor tasks around your tree home. Small carvings in the trunk, niches for lanterns, shelves for scrolls and pegs for hanging simple garments require maintenance. You sand rough edges, repair cracks with a mixture of clay and animal fat, and ensure that the tree remains structurally sound. This work is not laborious, but a form of worship, each stroke of the chisel a reminder of your place in the creative act. During this time, you might joke to yourself about being the world's first carpenter monk, though inside you know that your craft mirrors God's craftsmanship in creation. After these tasks, you prepare for the primary prayer service of the day sext, which falls around the 6th hour noon. You light a small oil lamp made from pressed olives or sesame and position it within a carved alcove. Its flame dances, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow on the tree's interior walls, almost like living icons. You begin your chants, each psalm and hymn spoken with deliberate slowness, mindful of the sacredness of each syllable. The silence of the forest outside blends seamlessly with your chant, creating a serene symphony that touches even the deepest chambers of your heart. Following sext, it's time for the longest period of solitude, personal contemplation. You lie on a simple mat, the shape of your body pressing into the hollowed wood. At first, sleep might tempt you, but you resist using the quiet to engage in contemplative prayer. You reflect on your past actions, your sins, and your aspirations for spiritual growth. You might quietly speak your concerns to God, your fears, your doubts, and your steadfast desire for divine grace. This candid dialogue, often whispered as though you feared disturbing the ghosts of the forest, becomes a daily confession and renewal. Late afternoon is reserved for service to the local community. Although you live in seclusion, you are not completely cut off. Villagers who live a few miles away bring offerings, grain cloth, or small gifts, seeking prayers, blessings, or healing words. You greet them with a bowed head and a soft smile, offering gentle guidance or a simple blessing in return. The local people respect your solitude, knowing that you, in turn, respect their needs. Historians still argue whether this interaction was common or if only a select few monks engaged with lay people. But here in this serene forest, such exchanges beautifully blended seclusion and service. As dusk approaches, you prepare for Vespers, the evening prayer service. The forest around you takes on a golden hue, and the flicker of your oil lamp grows brighter against the encroaching darkness. You chant hymns that speak of light, triumphing over darkness, a poignant contrast to your own surroundings. The chant's warmth seems to repel the shadows, reminding you that within your wooden walls, God's light holds firm. Finally, you settle in for your nightly vigil, a period of wakeful prayer that can last until the early hours. You sit upright against the tree, reciting the office of readings, or reciting the Jesus prayer in short, continuous breaths. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This repetitive invocation becomes a mantra, anchoring your mind when fatigue threatens to pull you into sleep. The nocturnal symphony of the forest owl calls distant rustlings, becomes your choir, heightening your awareness of the interconnectedness of all creation. As the night deepens, you may allow yourself a brief rest, but even sleep is laced with prayer. You embrace the discomfort of the hard mat and the chill of the tree's interior, trusting that every moment awake or asleep is an opportunity for devotion. The cycle of your day from pre-dawn prayer to late-night vigil is a tapestry woven with threads of discipline, humility, and unwavering faith. And as you finally drift into deeper sleep, still entwined with prayer, you are reminded that this life lived within a hollowed tree is not one of sacrifice alone, but of profound communion with the divine and all of creation. As the moon rises high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the forest, the rhythm of your life in the hollowed tree continues steady and unbroken. The peace that fills your heart as you drift to sleep is not simply the result of physical exhaustion. Though the day has been long and filled with work, it is a deeper kind of peace, one born of the quiet certainty that you are exactly where you are meant to be. In this space between the earth and the heavens, the world outside may rage with its noise and its demands, but within the tree there is only the silence of God's presence. For the monks who once called these hollowed trees their home, this peace was more than just a nightly retreat. It was a daily practice, a continual returning to the divine. And while the physical discomforts of living in the hollowed trunk were undeniable, cold nights, uncomfortable sleeping arrangements, and the ever-present danger of wild animals, the monks embraced these challenges as part of their spiritual journey. They understood that it was through these hardships that they could truly appreciate the beauty and sanctity of life. Historians still debate whether this form of asceticism, living in the harsh environment of the trees, was a necessary step in their spiritual growth, or whether it was simply an act of extreme devotion. Some argue that it was both. The harshness of the physical world, the isolation, and the solitude forced the monks to confront their own weaknesses and desires. There was no escaping themselves in the solitude of the forest. No distractions, no comforts, just the quiet hum of nature and the constant reminder of their dependence on God. But the monks didn't see their hardships as something to be endured for the sake of endurance. Instead, they saw them as opportunities for spiritual growth. Every ache and pain, every moment of discomfort was seen as an offering to God. It was in these moments that the monks believed they could truly surrender their will, their desires, and their ego to the divine. The physical trials of living in a hollowed tree were in their eyes a purification of the soul, a way to strip away everything that wasn't essential and focus solely on what truly mattered. One of the most profound aspects of their practice was the way they embraced the cycle of life and death. Living within the hollowed trees, the monks were constantly reminded of the impermanence of life. The trees themselves were living, breathing organisms that would eventually wither and die, just as the monks themselves would. This constant reminder of mortality gave their spiritual practice an urgency that was both humbling and empowering. Every moment became a prayer, every breath a gift from God. As the monks drifted into sleep each night, they did so with the knowledge that the next day would bring with it new opportunities for growth, new chances to deepen their connection with the divine. They didn't see sleep as an escape from the world. They saw it as a continuation of their sacred journey. The rest they found in their hollowed trees was not simply physical relaxation, but a spiritual surrender to the will of God. Imagine then the stillness that must have permeated the air as they slept beneath the canopy of the forest, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves above them, blending with the peaceful silence of the trees. The monks, though physically isolated, were never truly alone. In the stillness of their solitude, they found a profound connection to the world around them and to the divine presence that surrounded them. As the night deepens, you too might find yourself in a similar space where the worries of the day fade and the quiet of the night offers an opportunity for reflection, for peace, and for surrender. The monks who lived in hollowed trees remind us that in the midst of our own busy, chaotic lives, there is always the possibility of finding a sanctuary of stillness. Whether it's a moment of quiet reflection before bed, a walk in nature, or simply taking a few moments to breathe deeply and reconnect with ourselves, we can all carve out our own space of peace, just as the monks did in their humble tree homes. For as the night wears on and you drift deeper into sleep, remember that the practice of stillness and surrender is not reserved for those who live in hollowed trees. It is available to all of us, right here and now. In the silence of the night, we too can find the peace that the monks found within the trees, the rhythm of their lives, their devotion to simplicity, their connection to nature, all serve as reminders that true peace is found not in the outer world, but in the quiet spaces we create within ourselves. The night continues to unfold, the silence of the forest deepening as you rest. The shadows cast by the moon slowly shift with the passing hours, wrapping you in a quiet embrace that is both comforting and serene. In these moments of solitude, the monks who once lived in the hollowed trees found an extraordinary peace, one that was woven into the very fabric of their existence. It wasn't just about surviving in nature. It was about thriving within it, finding purpose and meaning in every detail of their environment. As you settle further into the calm, let's take a moment to imagine the thoughts that might have crossed the monks' minds in those still hours of the night. Would they have been contemplating the vastness of the universe, or perhaps reflecting on the simplest acts of kindness they encountered that day? Would their thoughts have drifted toward the struggles of their lives, acknowledging the discomforts of living in the trees, but ultimately finding solace in their unwavering faith? Historians still wonder whether the monks' meditative sleep cycles allowed them to receive divine inspiration, or if their minds simply wandered into the stillness of the night. Either way, there's something undeniably beautiful about how they used every moment of their lives, awake or asleep, as a channel for divine connection. The act of sleeping in the hollowed tree was in its essence an extension of the monks' meditative practices. In the tree, there was no barrier between the physical world and the spiritual. The rhythms of nature, the rustling of leaves, the movements of the earth, the sound of water flowing from nearby springs were all intimately connected with their inner states. These elements became an unspoken part of their prayer, a silent accompaniment to the invocations they whispered throughout the day. As they lay beneath the stars, they could feel the breath of the earth, the pulse of life, all around them, reaffirming their bond to the natural world. It was in these moments that they could truly experience the sacredness of all things, and perhaps it was here that the monks felt most at peace with themselves and with God. For those who lived in the modern world, it's easy to forget how powerful a moment of quiet stillness can be. We've built a life that's full of distractions, constant noise, flashing screens, and unceasing demands. It's hard to hear the quiet voice of our own thoughts, let alone the divine voice that might be whispering to us. The monks, however, made a deliberate choice to immerse themselves in the silence of the forest, to remove themselves from the distractions of the world, and open themselves up to the subtle, sacred rhythms of life. It wasn't about avoiding the world. It was about listening to it more deeply, seeing it as a reflection of the divine, and responding with gratitude and reverence. Historians argue whether the monks' practice of living in the hollowed trees was at its core an act of divine inspiration, or whether it was simply the most practical solution to their needs. Some suggest that the isolation of the forest allowed the monks to experience a heightened sense of divine presence, while others believe the act of living in the trees was more of a spiritual discipline, pushing them to strip away their earthly attachments. Either way, it's clear that the monks were not seeking isolation for its own sake, but rather as a means to reconnect with the divine and to live in harmony with nature. Every act, from the ritual of prayer to the simple act of foraging, was a way for the monks to align themselves with the greater rhythms of life. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the lessons of the Ethiopian monks. What might it look like to incorporate more stillness into your own life? How might the quiet moments in nature, whether it's a walk in the woods or the quiet hum of your surroundings, serve as opportunities for connection with something larger than yourself? The monks found their sanctuary in hollowed trees, but the peace they sought is not bound to any one location. It's available to each of us in the small, quiet spaces that we carve out in our busy lives. The practice of stillness is not about avoiding the world. It's about learning to engage with it on a deeper level. It's about being present in each moment. Whether you're standing under a tree, walking through the world, or lying down to sleep. Just as the monks found peace in the simplicity of their lives, we too can find peace in the simplicity of the present moment. Let the silence of the night fill you with the same peace the monks found in their hollowed trees. As the moon continues its journey across the sky and the night deepens around you, feel the weight of the world lift from your shoulders. With each passing moment, you move closer to rest, to that deep, soul-refreshing sleep. The trees may no longer be your home, but in this moment, they are with you. The lessons they taught the monks live on in you. Let that thought guide you into a peaceful, rejuvenating rest. The night unfolds quietly around you, as if nature itself has wrapped you in a soft, silent blanket. Just as the monks before you found a certain solace in the stillness of their hollowed trees, so too do you find a quiet space within your mind. In the peace of the night, we begin to see how the monks' lives were shaped by an unshakable belief that their connection to God and to the world around them was not just a practice, but a way of being. They didn't compartmentalize their spiritual lives from their daily existence. They lived every moment as an offering, and every act, however mundane, was done with reverence. The monks of Ethiopia, living in their hollowed trees, were masters of presence. They found peace not in the absence of struggle, but in the act of surrendering to it. When the monks woke up at dawn, greeted by the chill of the morning air and the silence of the forest, they didn't rush to do anything. There was no need for urgency. Everything was as it should be. This moment of quiet reflection, even before the first prayer, allowed them to step into their day, without distraction, fully aware of their place in the grand tapestry of life. The monks lived by the simple yet profound understanding that peace didn't need to be searched for. It was already present, waiting to be noticed. The question remains, how do we replicate this peace in our own lives? In today's world, we are bombarded by demands and distractions that make it nearly impossible to find time for reflection. We struggle to find the quiet spaces that would allow us to connect with ourselves, let alone the divine. Yet the monks offer us a valuable lesson. Their practice wasn't about seeking solace in the absence of sound or motion. It was about creating a space where they could hear the subtle whispers of their own hearts and the divine. They lived with intention and devotion in every single moment. Historians still wonder whether the monks' ability to live in isolation for such extended periods was a gift, a calling, or simply the only way to truly escape the noise of the world. Perhaps it was a combination of all these factors. The solitude allowed them to focus entirely on their spiritual path without interference from the outside world. And yet, this solitude was not about avoidance. It was about immersion. By choosing to live within nature, the monks embraced it as a living, breathing companion on their journey one that would never abandon them. In a way, nature itself became a silent teacher, guiding them through the complexities of their spiritual life. But despite the hardships of their lives, sheltering in hollowed trees, foraging for food, living in total seclusion, the monks never lost sight of the greater purpose. They didn't view their lifestyle as a punishment or a form of self-denial, but as a way to purify themselves and create an unbroken connection with the divine. Through every prayer, every bite of food, and every moment spent in solitude, they offered themselves fully to God. And in doing so, they experienced a peace that was beyond understanding. The stillness they sought was not an escape from life. It was a deep, lived experience of it. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine how these monks lived with such complete presence, never distracted by the noise of the outside world. In their hollowed tree homes, they found the quiet space to become fully immersed in each moment. In our busy lives, we often struggle to live with such intentionality, and the distractions of the modern world can make it seem almost impossible to find peace. But perhaps the monks' practice can offer us a path. The stillness they cultivated in the heart of the forest wasn't a luxury. It was an essential part of their spiritual life. Think for a moment about how you might begin to incorporate more intentional stillness into your own life, whether through meditation, mindful walking, or simply taking time each day to be present in your surroundings. You can begin to carve out a space where the distractions of the world fall away. You don't need to live in a hollowed tree or retreat to a remote monastery to experience the peace that the monks did. It can be found in the small moments of quiet when you step away from the noise of the world and simply listen. As you lie here in the stillness of the night, remember that the peace the monks sought is not reserved for the chosen few. It is available to all who seek it. The trees may have been their refuge, but the peace they found within them can be found within you as well. Allow the quiet of the night to wrap you in its embrace, and as you drift into sleep, let go of any lingering tension, knowing that the stillness you seek is already within you, waiting to be experienced. As the night deepens, the monks in their hollowed trees would have drifted into the kind of deep spiritual sleep that most of us can only dream of. For them, sleep wasn't an escape or a necessity. It was a continuation of their devotion. Every moment of their day, from the moment they woke at dawn to the time they laid their heads to rest, was a sacred act. The sleep they found in the hollow of their trees wasn't just a physical rest. It was a profound connection to the divine, a moment of surrender in which they could let go of the earthly burdens that had weighed on them throughout the day. The night would have been full of the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of crickets, the distant call of an owl. But in the solitude of their tree homes, these sounds weren't distractions. They were part of the symphony of life that reminded the monks of their place within God's creation. As they slept, they felt the rhythm of the earth beneath them, the pulse of life surrounding them, and the gentle sway of the tree as it moved with the wind. It was as if the tree itself was rocking them to sleep, holding them in its arms, whispering quiet comfort as they surrendered into the stillness of the night. The monk's relationship with the natural world wasn't one of domination or control. It was one of deep reverence and humility. They understood that they were not separate from nature, but a part of it. And in their hollowed trees they lived in a harmonious balance with the world around them, finding peace, not in isolation from the world, but in full immersion within it. They knew that everything they needed, food, shelter, connection, could be found in the natural world, and that by living in harmony with it, they could experience the divine in every moment. Historians still debate whether the monk's connection to nature was purely spiritual or whether it had practical benefits as well. Some argue that the monk's ability to live in such isolation allowed them to focus solely on their spiritual practice, while others believe that their deep connection to the natural world was a form of healing, providing them with physical and mental peace that enhanced their spiritual clarity. Either way, the monk's choice to live within the trees was an act of profound faith, and it shaped their spiritual practice in ways that continue to inspire us today. As you reflect on the lives of these monks, consider how their example of simplicity, devotion, and connection to nature might resonate in your own life. In our modern world, we often feel disconnected from the natural world. We live in cities surrounded by concrete and technology, and we are constantly bombarded by noise and distractions. But the monks show us that true peace is found not in escaping the world, but in reconnecting with it by finding stillness in nature, by listening to the world around us, and by embracing the simplicity of life. In the quiet of the night, the monks found their refuge, their peace, and their connection to the divine. They didn't need elaborate rituals or grand structures to experience the presence of God. They found it in the simplicity of the tree, in the silence of the forest, in the rhythms of the earth. And in doing so, they taught us that true peace isn't something we can seek outside of ourselves. It's something we can cultivate within by reconnecting with the natural world and with the stillness that lies at the heart of all things. As you drift into sleep tonight, let the quiet of the night remind you of the peace that the monks found in their hollowed trees. Let the stillness wash over you and allow yourself to surrender into the comfort of the moment. The world may be chaotic, but in the silence of the night, you too can find your own sanctuary. Just as the monks found their peace in the hollow of a tree, so too can you find peace in the quiet corners of your life. Tonight as you rest, remember that the peace you seek is already within you. You need not travel to distant lands or retreat to hollowed trees to find it. It is present in every breath, every moment of stillness, every connection to the world around you. Allow this peace to fill you as you sleep, knowing that it is always available to you, just as it was to the monks who lived in the trees long ago. As the night continues, the soft winds sweep through the trees, carrying with them the scents of the forest, the damp earth, the scent of pine, and the faint aroma of flowers blooming in the distance. These are the same scents the monks would have breathed in as they lay beneath the stars, resting after a long day of prayer, meditation, and work. The natural world, in all its simplicity and wonder, provided not only the physical sustenance, but also the spiritual grounding the monks needed to deepen their faith. Their connection to the earth was profound, so much so that they viewed every aspect of nature as a sacred expression of God's will. Every leaf that fluttered in the wind, every bird that soared overhead, every tree that stretched its limbs toward the sky was seen as a manifestation of the divine. The monks lived in this sacred space, surrounded by the living, breathing beauty of the earth. And in doing so, they learned to see the world around them, not as a chaotic, unpredictable force, but as a carefully crafted reflection of God's eternal wisdom. Historians have often wondered whether the monks' relationship with nature was a form of spiritual practice, or if it was simply a necessity for survival. Some believe that their deep immersion in the natural world was a way of aligning themselves with God's creation, while others argue that it was a way to gain insight into the deeper truths of existence. Regardless of the specific motivations, the monks' ability to live in harmony with nature allowed them to experience a profound peace that most of us rarely find in the hustle and bustle of modern life. The natural world was not just something to be observed from afar. It was something to be experienced fully. The monks learned to listen to the whisper of the wind, the rustle of the leaves, and the songs of the birds, and to see these sounds as messages from the divine. Every aspect of the natural world became an opportunity for spiritual growth. For them, the tree they lived in wasn't just a shelter. It was a teacher, a guide, and a companion on their journey toward greater understanding. The forest around them was not just a place to exist, it was a place to experience the divine in its purest form. For the monks, the act of sleeping in the hollow of a tree was a way to embrace both the vulnerability and the strength that came with living in such close contact with nature. The trees offered protection, but they also reminded the monks of the fleeting nature of life. In the stillness of the night, the monks would reflect on their place within the grand design of the universe. They would fall asleep, knowing that even as they slept, they were still connected to the divine. The quiet of the night was not a time for escape, but a time for communion with the earth and with God. Now, as we lie in the comfort of our own beds, it's easy to forget the simplicity and peace that the monks found in their hollowed trees. But if we take a moment to pause and reflect, we might find that the same peace they experienced is available to us too. We don't need to live in a hollowed tree to find the stillness that leads to spiritual growth. The world around us, in all its beauty and complexity, offers countless opportunities for connection, if only we take the time to listen. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, think about the ways you can create moments of peace in your own life. Just as the monks found their sanctuary in the hollow of a tree, you can find your own sanctuary in the quiet spaces of your day. Whether it's through a moment of reflection, a walk in nature, or simply sitting in stillness, take the time to connect with the world around you. In doing so, you might find that the peace the monks experienced is not just a distant memory of the past. It is a living, breathing presence that you can experience in the here and now. As you settle into sleep, know that you are never truly alone. Just as the monks felt the embrace of the trees around them, you are held in the embrace of the world, connected to something much greater than yourself. Allow that connection to guide you into a restful sleep, knowing that tomorrow is another opportunity to live in harmony with the world and with the divine. As you sink deeper into the quiet of the night, the peace that the monks once found within the hollow of their trees begins to settle into your own spirit. The monks' lives were not lived in a hurry. They didn't rush to fill the silence or distract themselves from the stillness that enveloped them. In the calm of the trees, they found a rhythm, one that mirrored the natural cycles around them, from the rising sun to the setting moon. Each day unfolded like a prayer, a meditative flow of time that wasn't interrupted by the pressures of society, by expectations, or by noise. Historians continue to wonder whether this deeply meditative lifestyle could be replicated in the modern world. Could we find a similar peace if we stripped away the excesses of our lives and returned to a simpler way of being? Could we create our own version of a hollowed tree sanctuary where we could reconnect with what truly matters? In the quiet of the night, it's easy to dream about it. Yet, in the monk's example, we see that it wasn't simply the physical space they inhabited that made them holy. It was the way they lived in that space, with intention, simplicity, and a deep, unshakable faith. When we look at the monks, we see individuals who knew the value of time, how every moment could be a prayer, every action could be an offering, every breath could bring them closer to the divine. Whether it was their morning prayers, their time spent foraging for food, or their long hours of silent meditation, the monks weren't just waiting for some future event to make them whole. They were living fully in the present, immersed in the rhythms of life that they believed were an expression of God's presence. You might wonder how such a lifestyle could fit into our fast-paced world, one where our calendars are full and our phones are constantly buzzing. The monks didn't need more time. They needed to approach each moment with reverence. And perhaps that is the lesson we can take from them. We don't need to escape to a hollowed tree to find peace. We need to find moments of stillness in our own lives. We need to allow ourselves to step back from the constant hustle and tune into the rhythms of the world around us, just as the monks did in their forests. Imagine for a moment what your life might be like if you could approach each day with the same simplicity and devotion. Imagine if, like the monks, you spent your days deeply aware of every moment, every action, as part of a greater spiritual journey. What if your daily routines became rituals of connection, not just to God, but to the world around you. You might find, as the monks did, that even in the simplest of tasks, you can experience a deep, sacred presence. As you continue to relax, drifting closer to sleep, you might begin to notice the subtle rhythms of your own life, the rise and fall of your breath, the quiet beating of your heart, the hum of the world outside. These are the same rhythms the monks heard in their hollowed trees. In the stillness, they found a profound connection to the world, to each other, and to the divine. And so, in the quiet of the night, you too can find that connection. Just as the monks let the natural world speak to them, so can you listen to the world around you. The earth's quiet whispers the rustling of leaves, the sound of your own breath. These are all ways that the divine makes itself known, if only we take the time to listen. Let these reflections carry you gently into sleep, just as the monks allowed the rhythm of the natural world to guide them. Let the rhythm of the night guide you to a place of peace. You don't need to live in a hollowed tree to find the serenity they discovered. You only need to find moments of stillness, of connection, and of deep listening. As you rest tonight, let your dreams be filled with the same peace that the monks found beneath the trees. Let the whispers of the world, just as they did for the monks, lull you into a deep and restful sleep. In the quiet hours before dawn, you wake to a sky still heavy with stars, each one a pinprick of light against the velvet darkness. In these moments, the monks who lived in their hollowed trees would rise once more, slipping from sleep into prayer without pause. For them, the night was not an interruption to their spiritual life, but an extension of it. Each breath, each movement was part of a continuous liturgy, a hymn of devotion that carried through the hours until the sun crowned the horizon once again. The transition from night to day was seamless. There was no jarring alarm, no harsh light to shatter the calm. Instead, the first pale rays of dawn filtered through the leaves, painting the interior of the tree with soft golden hues. The monks greeted this light with gratitude, reciting prayers that thanked God for the gift of a new day. They didn't need mechanical clocks. The forest's natural rhythms guided their schedule. Historians still debate whether this solar-based timetable was more healthful than the regimented hours of stone-built monasteries, but it certainly grounded the monks in the natural world they revered. As you stretch your limbs, feeling the rough texture of the wooden walls beneath you, you become aware of the cool air dancing through the cracks and knots of the tree. The forest outside begins to stir. The chorus of birdsong grows louder, and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush becomes more distinct. This daily awakening was not just a metaphor for spiritual rebirth. It was a lived reality. Every dawn was an opportunity to start anew, to reaffirm the monk's vows of simplicity, humility, and devotion. You step outside your wooden sanctuary, the dew still clinging to your tunic, and you lift your hands to the sky. The breath you take in is crisp and pure, a reminder that each moment is a gift. You begin your prayers as the sun's fingers reach through the canopy, tracing patterns on the mossy ground. In these moments, you feel a profound sense of unity with the world, the sky, the trees, the earth beneath your feet, and the divine that permeates it all. Your first task of the day is to tend to the small garden at the base of your tree monastery. The soil is rich and dark, and you kneel to inspect the young shoots of barley and chickpeas, ensuring they have enough water and sunlight. Cultivating this garden is more than a chore. It is a sacred act. Each seed you plant is an offering, and each sprout that breaks through the soil is a testament to God's generosity. Even the most mundane tasks, watering, weeding, pruning, become acts of worship performed with reverence and mindfulness. By mid-morning, you return to your hallowed tree, where you prepare for the day's study and meditation. You unroll your scrolls, the fragile parchment smelling faintly of sheep's leather and ink. The scriptures you read are centuries old, yet their words feel alive, resonating through the hollow trunk as you chant them softly. The sound of your voice vibrates in harmony with the tree's natural wood, creating an ambiance of sacred resonance that words alone cannot capture. Fringe tales tell of monks whose chants caused birds to pause mid-song as if the forest itself were listening, and historians still argue whether those birds were truly silenced or simply part of an elaborate legend. Either way, it's a beautiful image of nature and faith intertwined. As afternoon approaches, you engage in manual maintenance of your tree home. With simple tools, a chisel, a brush, and natural sealant, you repair small cracks in the wood, smooth rough edges, and reinforce weak spots. This work, though physically demanding, is performed with a spirit of care. Each repair is symbolic of a monk's commitment to tending both his environment and his own soul. Just as the tree requires attention to remain a stable sanctuary, so does the spirit require continual care to remain steadfast in faith. When the sun begins its descent, painting the sky with hues of crimson and violet, you prepare for vespers. The flicker of your lantern illuminates the carved alcoves and niches of the hollowed trunk, creating dancing shadows that seem almost alive. The chants of evening prayer rise in a gentle crescendo, weaving through the forest until the calls of night creatures echo back in response. In these moments, you are part of a living tapestry of devotion, where the boundary between human and nature dissolves, and everything becomes a song of praise. As night falls once more, you resume your vigil, allowing your mind to sink into the depths of contemplative prayer. You repeat the Jesus prayer in a soft, unhurried rhythm. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. With each repetition, you feel your thoughts slow, your worries dissolve, and your heart expand with compassion for all creation. In the silence of the hollowed tree, surrounded by the rhythms of nature, you find that the divine feels closer than ever, an intimate presence in every breath and every heartbeat. When you finally allow yourself to rest, your sleep is gentle and unbroken, filled with dreams that carry the scent of pine and the melody of bird song. You sleep knowing that your life lived in humble simplicity within the hollow of a tree is an unending prayer, a testament to the power of stillness, devotion, and the sacredness of nature. The next morning, you awaken to a mist that clings to the branches like a delicate veil. The forest is hushed, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the day's rituals. For the monks who lived in their hollowed trees, this early hour was a time of wonder, a moment when nature's beauty was most palpable. The misty air seemed to blur the line between heaven and earth, reminding the monks that the divine permeated every corner of creation. Historians still debate whether such atmospheric conditions inspired specific contemplative practices, but it's easy to see how the ethereal whisper of the forest could deepen one's sense of devotion. You pause for a moment, letting the mist envelop you, and you offer a prayer of gratitude for the gift of sight, for the ability to witness such beauty. In the simplicity of this act, you acknowledge that every sense, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, is a channel for divine grace. The monks recognize that by immersing themselves fully in the sensory world, they could experience the divine more intimately. Each dew-laden leaf, each bird's song, each ray of light seeping through the fog was part of a sacred choir calling them to deeper awareness. Your morning routine unfolds as before prayers, tending the garden meditation and study. Today, however, your focus is particularly drawn to the interconnectedness of all life. You reflect on how the mist's delicate embrace blankets the forest floor, nourishing the plants and creating a habitat for countless creatures. You consider how your own actions, no matter how small, ripple through the ecosystem. Perhaps the simple act of watering your garden helps sustain a family of insects, which, in turn, feeds the birds, which in turn pollinate the flowers. In this web of life, every small act becomes significant. In midday prayer, you offer a special intention for the health of the forest and its inhabitants. The monks believed that their prayers could extend beyond themselves, infusing the natural world with divine grace. Historians still argue whether this belief reflects a form of early ecological awareness, or if it was purely symbolic. Nonetheless, the monks' prayers for the well-being of the forest underscore their profound respect for creation. They saw themselves as guardians of the earth, entrusted with the care of the natural sanctuaries that had become their homes. As afternoon transitions to evening, you notice the subtle shifts in the forest's atmosphere. The mist gently retreats, replaced by the warm glow of the setting sun. You prepare for Vespers, the evening prayer service, and as you chant, you feel the day's energy merge with the peace of twilight. The forest responds in kind, the distant cry of an owl, the rustle of nocturnal creatures stirring in the underbrush, the soft whisper of the wind through the canopy. It's a symphony that transcends words, a living testament to the monk's belief that nature and spirituality are inseparable. In the late hours, as you sit in silent vigil, you contemplate the legacy of the hollow tree monks, their lives recorded in fragments of oral tradition, and scattered manuscripts speak of a radical devotion, one that embraced simplicity, solitude, and a profound reverence for the natural world. They remind us that in the face of life's complexities, we can find meaning not by adding more to our lives, but by stripping away the non-essential and listening to the world's quiet voice. As sleep beckons once more, you surrender to the gentle rhythm of your breath, trusting that each inhale and exhale is itself a prayer. The mist of the morning, the songs of the birds, the chants of prayer all become part of your dreamscape, weaving a tapestry of peace and presence. In these dreams you walk among the trees, breathing with them, singing with them, living as one with the forest. And as the dawn will come again, breaking through the mist and greeting you with its soft light, you will awaken once again to the simple, sacred rhythm of life, reminded that just as the monks found in their hollowed trees peace and communion with the divine, are never far away but waiting for us in the quiet moments, in the sacred spaces, right here and now. On the 18th day of our journey, we consider the ways in which the ancient practice of living in hollowed trees has echoed into modern times. Though the physical act of dwelling in trees has largely faded, the spiritual essence of this tradition persists. Across the globe, people are rediscovering the value of solitude, of silence, and of deep connection with nature. From mindfulness retreats in the mountains to ecotherapy sessions in urban parks, we see the same longing that drove Ethiopian monks to seek refuge in living trees, a longing for peace, presence, and a sense of belonging to something greater than ourselves. In contemporary spiritual practices, the idea of creating a living sanctuary within nature has taken many forms. People carve meditation spaces beneath ancient oaks, practice silent retreats in forest cabins, and cultivate sacred gardens that serve as personal altars. These modern sanctuaries, though not hollowed trees, embody the same principles: simplicity, intentionality, and reverence for life. Historians still debate whether these modern adaptations are direct descendants of monastic traditions or independent reinventions born of our collective yearning for stillness. Either way, they highlight the enduring power of nature as a conduit for spiritual renewal. You might find yourself visiting a quiet grove or a hidden garden, seeking that same sense of sanctuary the monks once found in their trees. In these spaces, you sit on a simple mat, close your eyes, and listen to the breeze whispering through leaves, to birdsong greeting the morning, to the steady hum of life all around you. In those moments, you enter a state of mindfulness, focused entirely on the present, just as the monks did centuries ago. It's not just individual practices that reflect the monks' legacy. Many religious communities today are integrating eco-theology into their teachings, emphasizing stewardship of the earth as a sacred duty. Conservation projects, reforestation efforts, and ecological education programs are often spearheaded by faith-based organizations, echoing the monks' belief that caring for nature is a form of worship. Historians still gray over whether this eco-spiritual movement is a direct revival of ancient practices or an entirely new development. Regardless, it underscores a profound truth. Our spiritual health is intimately tied to the health of the planet. In our fast-paced, digitally saturated world, carving out time for solitude and reflection can feel like a radical act. Yet, as we've seen through the monk's example, it's precisely in these quiet spaces that we find the clarity and peace we crave. Retreats that encourage forest bathing, silent meditation workshops in national parks, and spiritual pilgrimages to sacred groves all draw from the same well of longing that led Ethiopian monks to hollowed trees. These practices remind us that the natural world is both a refuge and a teacher, offering lessons in patience, humility, and interconnectedness. So, as you drift towards sleep tonight, consider how you might integrate a touch of the hollowed tree monasticism into your own life. Perhaps it's through a weekend spent in a rustic cabin, a daily walk in a local park, or a few minutes of mindful breathing surrounded by houseplants. You don't need to hollow out a tree to experience the peace of solitude. You need only to cultivate the intention to be fully present, wherever you are. Reflect on how your life might change if you approached each day with the monk's same reverence for the natural world. How might your perspective shift if you took time to listen to the wind, to honor the birdsong, and to treat every meal, every breath, and every act as a sacred offering? In doing so, you honor the legacy of the hollowed tree monks and carry their spirit into the modern era. As you settle into sleep, allow these reflections to guide you into dreams filled with verdant groves, gentle breezes, and the steady, comforting presence of ancient trees. Know that the peace the monks found in their hallowed sanctuaries is not lost to history. It lives on in every quiet moment you create, in every breath of stillness you take, and in every whisper of the natural world that calls you to remember who you are and why you are here. On this penultimate night, we reflect on the enduring debate among scholars and spiritual seekers. Was the practice of tree dwelling by Ethiopian monks born out of necessity, or was it an intentional, spiritually driven choice? Some argue that the harsh conditions and remote locations left monks with few housing options, making hollowed trees a practical solution. Others maintain that the practice was deeply symbolic, a deliberate embrace of vulnerability, impermanence, and unity with nature. The truth likely lies in a combination of both practicality and devotion. The environment of Ethiopia's highlands posed significant challenges: limited building materials, rugged terrain, and unpredictable weather. Hollowed trees, however, provided ready-made sanctuaries that were sturdy, sheltered, and intimately connected to the earth. The monks adapted these natural structures into dwellings that met their basic needs and allowed them to maintain closeness with the landscape they revered. Historians still argue whether these practical considerations were the primary driver or if the symbolism of living within a living tree held equal importance. Regardless of the initial motivations, the spiritual implications of tree dwelling cannot be overlooked. Living inside a tree dismantles the barrier between human and nature, forcing a constant awareness of the living world all around. Every rustle, every shift, and every creak becomes part of the monk's spiritual practice, a reminder that they are not separate from creation, but an integral strand in its tapestry. This radical embodiment of unity is a powerful testament to the monks' faith and their willingness to embrace vulnerability. In modern reflections, spiritual practitioners often cite the monk's tree dwelling as an extreme form of eco-spirituality. By inhabiting the trees, the monks demonstrated an unshakable commitment to living in harmony with the environment. This practice aligns with contemporary movements that advocate for sustainable living, minimalism, and deep ecology, all of which emphasize our interconnectedness with the earth. Whether viewed as survival or spirituality, the hollowed trees stand as profound symbols of humanity's relationship with nature. As you rest tonight, consider how necessity and devotion interplay in your own life. Are there areas where practical constraints can be transformed into opportunities for spiritual growth? Can a limitation be reimagined as a path to deeper connection with yourself, others, or the natural world? The hollowed tree monks teach us that when we embrace our circumstances fully, whether comfortable or challenging, we open ourselves to profound transformation. Think about the ways in which your own environment shapes your inner life. Perhaps living in a small apartment could inspire you to simplify your possessions and focus on what truly matters. Maybe a noisy neighborhood could prompt you to cultivate inner silence through meditation. By engaging with our surroundings as active participants in our spiritual journeys, we can find sacredness in the ordinary and meaning in the mundane. Let this reflection settle in your heart as you drift closer to sleep. Embrace the notion that every aspect of your life, your home, your community, your challenges, holds the potential for spiritual awakening. In the quiet hours of the night, as the wind whispers through the trees, remember that you too can live with the same intentionality and reverence that the Ethiopian monks found in their hallowed sanctuaries. Allow these thoughts to guide you into a deep, peaceful rest, knowing that the practice of tree dwelling, whether born of necessity or devotion, offers us a timeless lesson in unity, presence, and the sacredness of all life. Tonight, as we arrive at the final section of our journey, we gather together the many threads we've explored: the monks' radical devotion, their harmonious relationship with nature, the symbolic power of hollowed trees, and the ways in which their practice resonates in our modern world. In the quiet of the forest, these monks crafted lives that were prayers in motion each moment, an offering of simplicity, humility, and presence. Their hollowed trees became living cathedrals where the sacred and the everyday coexisted in perfect harmony. We've seen how every aspect of monastic life, dawn prayers, mindful foraging, scriptural study, manual labor, and nocturnal vigils, was imbued with reverence and intention. The monks didn't just endure hardship, they embraced it as a path to spiritual growth. The comfort of a hollowed tree was minimal, yet within its wooden walls they discovered a richness of experience, richer than any earthly palace. They taught us that true sanctuaries are not built of stone, but made of presence, mindfulness, and a deep connection to the world around us. Historians still argue about many details of this ancient practice, the origins of tree dwelling, the specific daily routines, and the exact nature of miracles attributed to these monks. Yet one thing remains indisputable: the legacy of the hollowed tree. Monks endures as a testament to the power of simplicity and solitude. Their lives remind us that we do not need to abandon the world to find peace. We need only to engage with it fully, with an open heart and unclouded mind. As you lie here tonight, feel the steady rise and fall of your breath, the gentle weight of your body sinking into rest. In these final moments, allow yourself to release every distraction, every worry, and every tension. Imagine the comforting embrace of a hollowed tree, its sturdy walls cradling you, its roots anchoring you, its branches reaching toward the heavens. Let this image fill you with a sense of safety, presence, and profound peace. Remember the monk's lessons to live each moment as a prayer, to find sanctuary in simplicity, and to honor the sacredness of the natural world. Whether you carry house plants, hike forest trails, or simply pause to listen to the wind, you can bring the spirit of the hollowed tree monasticism into your own life. Presence is the greatest gift you can offer to yourself, to others, and to the world. Now, as you prepare to drift into uninterrupted sleep, let your thoughts soften and your heart open to the gentle whisper of the divine. The world will continue its constant motion, but for now, you are still rooted in peace. You are cradled in the love of creation, held in the embrace of something greater than yourself. Rest now, dear listener, in the quiet sanctuary of your own heart. May your dreams carry you through forests of wonder, where every rustle of leaves and every breath of wind is a hymn of praise. Sleep deeply, knowing that you are part of the great tapestry of life, connected to the divine presence that permeates all things. In these final moments before sleep, allow the pace of your thoughts to slow, your breath to lengthen, and your awareness to soften. Imagine the hollowed tree once more, its gentle sway, its silent wisdom, its comforting embrace. Feel the solidity of its wooden walls around you, warm from the sun, cool with the night's breeze. As you breathe in, sense the life within you, merging with the life of the forest. As you breathe out, release every tension, every worry, every lingering thought. Softly, you let go of the need to do or achieve. In this moment, there is only being, simply sitting in stillness cradled by creation itself. The world outside may be tumultuous, but within this quiet refuge, you are at peace. You are safe. You are home. Allow each word you have heard tonight to sink into the quiet spaces of your mind, nurturing a seed of calm that will grow with every night's sleep. Carry the lessons of the hollowed tree monks into your dreams: simplicity, presence, devotion, and unity with the natural world. Tonight rest in the gentle hush of the forest, carried by the whispering winds of eternity. May your sleep be deep, restorative, and filled with the same peace that these monks discovered in their wooden sanctuaries. And when you awaken, may you carry this stillness into your day, remembering always that the divine is present in every breath, in every moment, in every living thing.